Welcome to this webinar. It's being brought to you by The Leap. They're an organisation that support arts and culture, but they're doing things in different ways. They work directly with communities and they seek to build knowledge, skills and confidence, offering both financial and non-financial support. They're all about developing a community-led culture, and in this webinar I'll be helping you develop your understanding and ability to communicate impact and value well. So I hope that you're going to enjoy this, and let's get started. So in every webinar that we've run, it's really important to think about, what can you get from this session? And it's aimed to help you understand who cares about impact and value measurement, whether you're running a creative project, testing an idea, running an event, growing an organisation. This is a session to help you really think about the importance of impact and value measurement. Before we get into that, we're going to learn a little bit about theory of change and how does that link to help you measure your impact and value. And hopefully, by the end of the session, you'll be becoming familiar with the different stepping stones to doing this well. Even if you've not got much time, you've not got much experience or much budget, you should be able to get started or improve on things that you're already doing. So we're going to look at from context to social impact and value measurement. We're going to look at theory of change. We're going to help you get started with measuring that impact and value that you're creating. And hopefully we'll be giving you tools, tips and examples, as well as some case studies to help you understand this, embed it and get practically started. First of all, we're going to start to look at, what is social value, who cares and why bother? And we're going to look at some simple methods to, like I say, get started or improve if it's something this is something you're already doing. And throughout the session, we'll be hoping to show you what it looks like when it's done well. But there's no right or wrong way to get started. Quite often people, don't get started soon enough. And we're here today to help you start to think about how you can do this as part of your ongoing project work. What is it? This SROI, that's Social Return on Investment Network, stated that social value is the relative importance of changes that occur to stakeholders, that's anyone who's got a vested interest in your project, as a result of an activity. And so it's, what's the relative importance of different changes that occur, hopefully positive changes that occur and progression that gets made as a result of activities that you're running. And that's what you're trying to learn about and measure and see if there's some value in that. It's produced over a period of time when somebody, be that a customer, beneficiary, or a wider stakeholder, engages with an organisation or a project or an event. And measuring social value from the start to the end of these stakeholders or beneficiaries' journeys is what you start to track and consistently look at over time to see what's happening as a result. And we're wanting to see what's changed for that person from being linked with your organisation or your activities. And this change is known as the theory of change. In theory, what has changed, and putting some thought behind that. We'll come back to some models on how you do that shortly. Just another point on why do this, why bother, why account for social value. So it's become more and more important over time and more of a prevalence of measuring this stuff for different reasons. There's something called the Social Value Act that came about in 2012, and that's an act that means that where possible, public sector organisations like councils and the NHS and people who are procuring services with a public purse, with government money or local authority money, they score or meant to score those partners or deliverers of work more highly if they're delivering wider social value. There's a preference put on that. The European, although we're out of Europe, the European Commission and different kinds of EU funds and other wider funds have certain legislation that again are trying to ensure that those contracts or those people providing opportunities that have additional an added value, social impact and social value are the ones that get invested in. There's been a growing development around social impact investment, and rather than just investors and people like Dragon's Den solely using their angel investment money to back businesses that are going to give them the highest return, always financial return, there are people now who are wanting to invest to get more of a social and wider societal or community benefit type impact back, in addition to that financial return. Depending on how you choose to buy, what you choose to buy, you may have noticed that there's this ethical consumerism that's evolved in recent decades, where people are voting with their feet or voting with their purse as to what they choose to buy. Maybe that it's going to save the planet, maybe it's going to benefit the environment, maybe it's going to give farmers in different countries a better rate of pay. But we choose what we buy, and we have the power to influence how things get done. And so there's that growth of ethical consumerism. You may have heard of something, corporate social responsibility. There's other phrases as well, ERGs and other phrases that get termed now, but basically corporates and large multinational organizations have developed a reputation over time for not doing enough, not giving back, and in recent decades they've been looking at how to do more to invest in good, whether they're a big brand or a big bank or some large corporate organization of any kind. They've usually got some sort of social corporate social responsibility mission, method, or practice that they're trying to score points on, partly to gain contracts, but hopefully because that's part of their sort of ethical give back in terms of how they operate and investing in people, places, communities, social purpose of some kind. So being aware of that and tapping into that, can be helpful, whether it's about sponsoring something, supporting a cause, or benefiting from wider mentors, volunteering, or something else. The growth of corporate social responsibility has been significant in recent years. There's also things on a more simplistic level that's we call a social contract, but this might be, your social value proposition. And small businesses, large businesses, charities, social enterprises, alongside their kind of business and financial proposition, creating a social value proposition is something that's key as part of a whole business model and a whole business plan. Whether you make key pledges around the social impact or the community benefit you're going to make, or whether you put it together as a social value proposition, there's no right or wrong way, but these are ways in which social value and doing this kind of work has become more prevalent. Bottom line is, measuring your impact and learning about whether that impact is creating social value helps you create a useful evidence base. It's an evidence base for the financial savings and benefit that you're creating. It helps build trust, track record, and helps you write better bids, helps you stand out and pitch better, compete. You've got that key data that evidences the value and the impact that you're making, potentially over and above other initiatives. But it also helps that you can sleep at night, knowing that you've done a good job, that you've delivering the impact that you intended, maybe more impact than you intended once you start looking at it. And hopefully, in addition to some of what we've said, carrying out social value not only strengthens your bids and your pitches, but it creates data and language and examples and case studies that all help you better market and communicate and showcase and inspire people through what you're trying to do. So let's move on. So the key thing we wanted to do first was look at the theory of change. Theory of change, an alternative to or a complementary tool alongside the business model canvas. In a previous session, we looked at the 2-sentence business plan and business model canvas. Theory of change is a similar sort of almost like a short, sharp one-pager, which pulls out some of the elements of your business planning, like your vision and your mission. It pulls out things like, your services and people involved, but it stacks it up in such a way that it helps you start to think about what are the results of our delivering our mission going to be, and what is the impact going to be? And it helps you start to think about more sort of strategic objectives that you might need to deliver this, and helps you think about, you know, what you're doing and why, so that you can then use this as a way to start to piece together what the goals and the aims that you intend to deliver, the impact that that should create, so that you've almost got a benchmark to track and to review and to think, are we achieving this? Is the impact we thought we were going to make the impact we're actually having? And it helps you look at whether you're delivering that theory of change, whether the customers and the beneficiaries and wider stakeholders involved are getting the impact and the progress, and they're on board with things. So this blank canvas here, you know, it can be a bit overwhelming when you start to look at it and think, oh, you know, how do I fill this in? But as a handout that you can download as part of the webinars series, this theory of change is something that you can print out or use and scribble on as you wish. I've got an example here, and it looks quite busy, so I'll just warn you, there's a lot of information on this screen. I'm just going to walk you through an example, which then hopefully will help you think about how you might complete this. So this example was an organisation I worked with some years ago, not so much in the creative industries world, but in the world of mental health and peer support, and supporting people to manage and lead their own health and well-being, and be less reliant on health services and the NHS and doctors and so on. So the organisation, Hope for the Community, the vision for this organisation was to support parents, families and people across all communities, so that they're equipped to support and manage their own physical and mental health. And they were very keen on making sure that they could support others using self-management techniques. So they had this big vision to want to empower and enable parents, families and people across all communities to better manage their own physical and mental health. That was the overarching vision for the future they wanted to see. Their mission was to be the UK's leading self-management care provider. And then we've got a whole series of examples here of how they intended, you know, to get there. So some of the solutions and services, you know, and you'll have your own thoughts of things that you do. For them, it was delivering self-management courses on and offline. It was developing peer learning programs and a way of training and building the capacity of different trainers and groups in the community, so that the support could cascade further. And in doing so, you know, developing a network of thematic champions to raise awareness, promote impact, and deliver all sorts of bespoke programs over time to aid in providing cutting-edge research into self-management and care, and partnering and linking with a university actually to do that. You know, for them, their partners were people like the Autism Society, the MS Society, Macmillan. They started off working with parents and carers of children and young people with autism, and that was their initial group of people that they tested this work with. But they realised quite quickly that it was transferable to other types of community, other types of people with different kinds of physical and mental health needs, and they were able to adapt. They knew they were going to long term be adapting these services to meet different groups, like people affected by MS, people affected by cancer, people affected by HIV and AIDS, and that XYZ there, you know, and other people with other needs. Could be, you know, working with veterans, could be working with people with chronic fatigue, long COVID. You know, the model they'd got was then transferable to different audiences, and they knew they'd need different people and partners to help them to get there. And they were working in partnership with the University of Coventry, because some of the people on their board were from there. And clearly, because they're working in the health and mental health world, NHS England, clinical commissioning groups, GPs were all other partners and stakeholders beneficiaries of what they had to offer. For them, when it was looking at results, there were lots of different things that they might want to track, and they were sort of guessing at the time what they might want to do. And that's it, initially it is all guesswork. It's just putting down your initial thoughts on what you hope or what you think the results might be, unless you're doing this after a year or two and you've got some evidence already on the numbers of people that are getting involved. So it may be for them, they were looking at the number of people a year that were going to be coming on their courses and programs, number of new trainers, and the number of people supported through the learning hub that they were creating in different activities, the number of self-care programs happening in different communities, and as it says, the impact that they were hoping for people living happier, healthier lives and more independently for longer. They were hoping to reduce the need or the dependence on certain types of medication for people with different long-term conditions, potentially less visits to the GP and hospital for some of those beneficiaries that they were working with, and hopefully stronger communities who were empowered to provide effective support for one another and manage their own needs in a community setting without the need to then progress. There's almost an element of preventative support. I just stop, sort of take a breath there, and have you sort of have a think about your own organisation. This is very health focused, and some of you might be working in arts and health or cultural community work linked to health and well-being, but you might just need to digest this in your own way for your own organisation. And for you, your vision might be a world where the ability to participate in arts is has no bounds, and everybody's able to create freedom of expression. You'll know what your bigger picture vision is. What's a world where such and such happens? You hopefully will have your sort of mission coming together, a mission statement of sort of 10 to 15 words that gives you your elevator pitch, so to speak, because we've talked about that in other webinars. And if need be, you can go back and look at those and think about what your mission is. Your own solutions might look like training programs, might look like cultural services, might look like events, might look like the creation of content, podcasts, videos. Who knows? You'll have your own solution services and things that happen in order to achieve that mission and vision. Your partners will all be very different. They might be linked to arts and culture, they might be linked to youth services, they could be linked to the LEAP, clearly a partner currently and hopefully into the future with the work that you're doing, and you'll have your own results, your own things. It might be the number of people coming to events and activities, the number of people who are coming to shows and performances, and ways that you're reaching new audiences. It could be the number of listens or the number of views on a particular piece of content. It might be, anything at all, that's directly linked to the impact that you want to create. And that could look like some of these outcomes around health and well-being. It may look like environmental improvements. It may look like, stronger communities, overcoming, challenges in communities through the arts, using arts as a vehicle to achieve all sorts of impact. So you'll have your own version of this. This is just there as a prompt, really, to help you work that through. Now, in this theory of change, we've got a number of spaces for you to think about the key strategic objectives to help you achieve that vision, and think, on a larger scale, what are some of the key strategic objectives or goals you need to achieve to make the above happen, and Hope knew that in order to achieve all this stuff, they'd have to design and deliver really high quality self-management and peer learning programs, and the programs were a core strategic objective, and having the right people involved and the right level of quality and vetted quality was going to be important. They knew that in order to cascade that learning, training and developing others, and in their case, to create a business model off of this, they were going to be doing that via license, to ensure fees coming back and create quality and consistency was key for their particular vision. And they knew they were going to want to create this needs-led culture and continually improve this set of services through shared knowledge, research, and impact. And they were going to have to create the networks and the feedback loops, in order for that to happen. So that's just one example. And there's a reminder there of why we do this. We do it because we believe we can evidence that self-management, strong support networks are the most effective tools to help people live healthy, happy lives. You'll see by putting these little sound bites down, it just helps build your language really for how you communicate what you do, coupled with a business model canvas or a 2-sentence business plan. It can be really helpful when you're having to pitch in that elevator pitch. You're out talking to people and you suddenly realize this is somebody that could help you. You can draw on some of the phrases and the language that you get down, so that you can easily communicate what it is you're doing and why you're doing what you do. So that's your theory of change. So how does this link to everything else? Once you've got, the theory of change there helps you start to think about the results and the impact that you want to have. And it's those elements that we start to move forward with around measuring impact, and we measure that impact with those people and partners that have been involved, as you'll come to see as we work through this. So, what is social accounting? We're just going to give you a quick overview. It's a method to measure change across the stakeholders' journey. So we talked about that theory of change. Social accounting is practically measuring that change across these stakeholders' journeys. And stakeholders can be the direct beneficiaries that you're working with, but they could also be your funders or wider beneficiaries, as we'll come to see. You start to record and gain evidence of what that change may be. And that can be in various methods. It can be verbal initially, but then it might be in video capture, it might be through a survey, it might be through interviews or focus groups, other methods as we'll check in on shortly. But then from gaining that evidence and doing that impact measurement, you're then able to start to report and communicate what this change is to a variety of audiences. Those audiences might be your direct groups to show, look, we said we'd do this, we listened, you helped shape this project or this event or this festival, and look what we achieved. It might also be to a variety of wider funders, stakeholders. It might be that the council or an arts network has backed your work and you're needing to report and communicate back the impact that you've had. So this all forms part of that type of work. It is worth bearing in mind that there are thousands of social and environmental impact metrics currently being used around the world. And they might include things like carbon emissions. They might include things like healthy lifestyles and the happiness index. There's something called TOMS, which is a framework for measuring from impact, social return on investment. There's all sorts of methods. Different sectors have their own. So like housing associations, and the housing sector has the HACT kind of toolkit. There's all sorts of toolkits and methods, and really it's all about starting where you can and finding what works for you. That's what we're going to be looking at. And when you get to the point where you're producing some level of social accounts, or some level of communication that outlines the impact that you're making, these things can come in all sorts of forms. It might be a sustainability report, CSR report, environmental annual reports is often what, these sorts of information gets tucked into an annual report. If you've set up as a community interest company, for example, there's something called a statement of community benefit, and each year you have to report back, what have you delivered in terms of impact for your community of interest. And again, that is an aspect of social accounting where you report that back. So there's all sorts of ways that social accounting takes place. But I'd take a few minutes to just think how is this currently happening in your project, in your organization? How are you currently maybe even planning? What were you thinking about doing, in measuring the impact to make sure that you're going to achieve that or that it's happening? What's going on for you right now? What methods have you got the capacity to use, and who have you got to involve in this? Is it just you? Have you got a small volunteer team? Have you got a little working group, steering committee, a board? Have you engaged with a local college or university to make use of some of their students? Who's going to get this done? And we'll be looking, through the next section on, what does this look like when it's done well? And the point is, getting started is key. It may be that you haven't done anything yet, and this is a new topic for you, and that's fine. But working through where you can get started or how you can improve and make the time for this, or get some additional, further training as you're doing now on this, is all helpful. So I'm going to jump back and take that step back to theory of change, where we were, and align that with sort of buzzwords and how these things kind of get done as a flow chart, as you'll see. So, as we've said, the theory of change is about tracking the changes that happen for that beneficiary as a result of getting involved in your work. In theory, what's changed for them as a result of different things. And, it could be impact areas. We've mentioned it might be education and training impacts, health and well-being, social inclusion, community cohesion. You'll know what kind of impacts could happen as a result of your work or are doing. And when you're looking at tracking these things and what it then leads to, this flowchart starts to outline that. So in terms of theory of change, inputs are, the people, the resources, the aspects that are kind of put into the project or the organization in order for these activities to happen. So what has to be put in terms of people and human resources, volunteers, knowledge, skills, particular budgets to cover certain costs. But there's a series of things that are inputs into the project or program of what you're doing. Then there are key activities. So that's almost your products and services, your solutions, your interventions. What is it that's being delivered with those inputs and those resources? Then you start to get into outputs, which then turns into outcomes. And then people will often measure and track, they know what they're putting in. They know there was a budget there that they were going to use to run a project with. They know who's involved in terms of people. They know what it is they're going to deliver. They've got some thoughts on the numbers of people, the outputs of, how many people are going to come to how many events, at what time, where, and some of the detail around that. And they have a sense of what some of the benefits, what some of the physical outcomes are going to be, but they don't often track the real impact and value of what it is they're doing. So we're going to walk through beyond theory of change and into how we measure impact and value. And we've got some tools to help you think about this. So this tool in particular was developed by a woman called Nikki Dickens, somebody who we've done some work with, an organisation called Profit for Purpose. And it's a really simple way of trying to get your head around what do these buzzwords mean. We've just talked about output, outcomes, impact and value. So I'm just going to kind of walk through what are those things and what would evidence look like for these things. So an output, is what's happened as a result of that stakeholder's journey. The inputs we said were the things going into the organisation, the resources, the money, the people, the time. But then what then happens as a result? So the first thing is an output. What's happened as a result of that stakeholder getting involved and having a journey with you. So we use an example of Jenny here. Jenny has attended a confidence building course. It could be Jenny's attended a festival, Jenny's attended an art group, Jenny's been involved in an exhibition, workshops to create art for an exhibition. But then an outcome is, so what's changed as a result of Jenny getting involved? So as a result of this coming to this course, Jenny's now improved her confidence. So improved confidence is an outcome. Yeah. She might have developed some new skills. She might have increased knowledge of something specific. She might have visited something that she's not visited before. And so, what's the impact then of these outcomes? What happens next? And we know that, what is Jenny doing differently as a result of her improved confidence? In this case, Jenny secured a job. Jenny might have decided to go on another training course. Jenny might have decided to go out with, build her social circles. As a result of this improved confidence, she might then be starting to socialize more, or, build her support network, or have the confidence to go back to that that gallery, that museum, attend another festival now that she's been to one and she's seen what it was like. Or there's so many things that you'll be able to apply this to in your own setting. But ultimately, there's outcome number one is Jenny turned up. She's attended. Output, the outcome is that she's improved her confidence in this case. The impact is she's secured a job. And then the value starts to kick in, and that value is to different people. Who's as a result of what's going on for Jenny here, who is this a value to, and what is that value is something we'll look at in a second. There's going to be some direct benefit and direct value for Jenny herself. There's going to be some indirect benefit to other people, and then wider benefit, community benefit, societal benefit. And the same will be happening as a result of your projects, as a result of your exhibitions, as a result of your new content creation. The ripple effect is happening whether you're tracking it or not. And these are just tools and tips and ways for you to start to think about, what are the outcomes that are happening? What is the change that's happening for your customers, stakeholders, and beneficiaries? What is that actually achieving? What is happening that's now different, that wouldn't have otherwise happened as a result of somebody coming into contact with your work, your projects, your events, your activities, and then what value looks like as a result. So let's have a look at that. As I said, there's three different types of value. When we think about who's this of value to, clearly there's value to Jenny. She's got increased self-worth. She's got more money. With having this job, she's got more money available. She can now pay for debts. She can afford to feed her family. Perhaps she's now able to go on a holiday for the first time in 10 years. Till you interview, or you talk to people, you listen to what's being said around the table. You don't know what the value is, but you'll be surprised when you start asking just the level of impact that some of your initiatives are having, directly to those people who are coming. And they might be, they might be your beneficiaries, they might be your staff, they might be wider clients who are getting involved with or are buying what you're doing. But there's lots of direct benefit that's going to be happening. And so thinking about what you're doing is a value to, and how you might start to talk to them, is what we're going to look at next. Indirectly, Jenny's family is benefiting, from Jenny's increased health and well-being. She might have more energy. She might have a better mood. She might be around more. Certainly, the employer is benefiting from Jenny's skills, this new job. And local shops are benefiting as a result of Jenny spending more in the community. So there's all this ripple effect that can happen. And then widely, at a societal level, the government's benefiting from savings and welfare benefits. If Jenny is now back into work, there's savings there, and there's tax payments, putting it crudely, which sometimes social value sort of looks at these measures. the school that Jenny's children are going to benefiting. The children are happier at school, they might have better attendance. Jenny might now have money to be able to pay for them to go on trips and other things. So there's other things that they can get involved with there. And then the local economy clearly is benefiting because there's money being spent in shops and restaurants and wherever else. And so it's just thinking it through, who directly, it's the individuals that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis. Indirectly, it's those slightly wider but linked beneficiaries, that the families and the carers of suppliers and people in the local environment, the schools, the employers, and so on. And then more widely, these are people that you would never come to meet potentially. They're people who hold budgets, or people who are trying to address inequalities, or people who are trying to achieve things, and you're by proxy, you're helping them achieve their goals by existing. And these are the kinds of agencies and organizations that, if they know the level to which you're delivering great outcomes and achieving the kinds of goals that they want to achieve, they might choose to spend their money with you through commission work or contracts, or through certain funded initiatives. So that's why we start to think about some of this stuff. And again, you can download these little tools and print them out, or have them on your own computers, and put your own notes and thoughts there in terms of what it is that you're doing and how you're having that value. And you can you can use a case study like Jenny from within your own organisation, or a couple of case studies, to think through what those benefits and what that ripple effect is. So, how do social enterprises, community enterprises, community projects, how is it that what you're doing, creates value? And clearly, in many different ways, through art, through engagement, through performance, and through history and heritage. These pictures here sort of represent a range of different initiatives that I've worked with, from Down syndrome, that we're going to hear a little bit about as a case study shortly, working with people with complex and additional learning needs and health needs, and how they work with people in communities. There's a black and white picture there, In Place of War. They're an organisation that goes into different parts of the world where there've been war or conflict, and help rebuild communities through arts and culture. I'll perhaps jump to that red bus there. That's Shiverpool Tours. And so over in Liverpool, many moons ago, working with somebody who was a former drama student, and they didn't want to work in the local takeaway shop. They wanted to create work for young people and budding drama students and others. And so they created tours, guided tours in the local area, but rather than just walk around and talk about the history, they dressed up and they brought a theatrical performance to their guided walks and tours, and that's grown from strength to strength. You've got an example here of Kendall Calling. I was involved in the very first one, funding that years ago, and that was just initially a project to get going, and bring people into the Lake District. Everybody travels to Glastonbury or travels to Leeds Reading or whatever it might be. The Kendall Calling group, who first set that up, wanted to bring people to the beautiful parts of the Lake District, bring money, boost the economy, highlight talent and local artists, from the north of England, and reinvest surplus profits that they made from that festival back into the community. Plus, they wanted to make sure that you didn't have to shell out for the festival in one foul swoop. I think they were one of the first festivals, or the only festival at a time, when they first started to have a kind of payment plan to make it affordable for people to actually go and get to that festival. And other examples that you see there. There's always that ripple effect. We're going to talk a bit more about how they create that value. And that value, usually we take it back to basics. Somebody's providing, an organisation or a project team are providing some sort of service or activities or events, and then some sort of change, this is that theory of change, some sort of change is experienced as a result of that. as a result of that, that journey, that experience, there's some level of social impact that's happening. And that impact could be in health, it could be in education, employment, housing, economy, these other things listed here. There's lots of different kinds of, arts, heritage, all sorts. And then there's social value then gets created. And that could be financial impact, that could be localized impact, or that could be non-financial. Yeah. So this is sort of introducing the thinking that there's different kinds of value, financial value, value for a local area, and then non-financial, which usually relates to things like well-being, as we'll see. Yeah, and there's different methods, which is just to highlight, it's getting a bit technical, but it's worth just realizing that as you sort of measure value over time, there's chasing where the money goes and tracking where the money goes. Social return on investment is a method for tracking, what's the saving to the public purse, and financially, what are the cost savings for keeping young people, out of the care system, or keeping somebody out of the prison system, or not needing to pay for an ambulance to take people to hospital, or the carbon footprint of stuff, and the cost savings involved in managing waste better. So there's social return on investment. There's locality based that we just said, so to a local area. There's something called LM3, which is a method for helping look at how you measure what value and financial value is retained in a local area, for example, through buying and purchasing in a particular area, or using venues and spending money in particular ways in a local area, keeping that money locally. You then get into the kind of non-financial, which looks at well-being outcomes, and there's things like outcome stars, which is a very simplistic way of looking at how somebody's journey has changed over time on a scale of 1 to 5, on a scale of 1 to 10, and certain key areas of importance. How have things changed or not? And particularly if you're working in arts and health and mental health, there's something called WEMWEBs, which is a kind of mental health improvement tracking system, which is a form of outcome stars. I mentioned before there are sector-led value measurement methods, and it's a housing association toolkit that helps people measure social value within the housing system, and there's many others. What we often promote and talk about are blended methods, often community groups, people starting out, creative freelancers. They haven't necessarily got the tools, the money, or the skill to look at these particular national standard levels of measuring value and impact, but they can dip into the principles of these things, and they can create methods that keeps things simple and affordable. And the way we support people to do this, as we're going to see in a minute, is you create what we call key value indicators. So key areas that you're having value and consistently having value, and your key stakeholders, beneficiaries, and customers tell you what they value, and you measure that to save yourself time and trying to measure everything. And then you can come up with pledges or statements of intent, or it turns into your social value proposition, and you set out your stall for areas that you consistently have value, that you track, that you can then clearly evidence over time the level of value you're having in key areas. So I just wanted to kind of jump across give you some examples, because sometimes having examples helps bring it to life a little better. This chart here, again, there's a lot of text, but we've got 4 examples that a couple I briefly talked about before. It talks about their legal structure. That's only on there to say it's irrelevant what your legal structure is, whether you're a freelancer, a startup, you're a charity, you're a company limited by guarantee, you're a cooperative. They're all creating levels of impact and value. But what you might find is when you start to talk to people, and this again is to help you think about who might you talk to, and who's going to give you information about whether or not you're creating an impact in their lives, whether you're creating some level of value. Your direct customers, direct beneficiaries, and indirect beneficiaries, these are the people who will be able to tell you what's the difference that you're making. And you'll remember in that theory of change, the products, the services, the activities, they completely vary from organization to organization. And you'll resonate with, some of this. Hopefully, you might be delivering workshops or learning opportunities. You might be delivering performances. There might be conferences and events. There might be, cultural heritage activities. Whatever it is that you're up to in your community is what's being offered, but there's both people who are paying for it, as in the customers of these things, and the people who are benefiting from it directly or indirectly that you can talk to and hear what they've got to say, and that will soon give you a sense of how you're having an impact and how you're having value. And so I'm going to walk through an example shortly of Down syndrome, so we'll get into that in a little bit more detail, but it's just to help you to think, who might you engage with to measure your impact and value? In your own case, who's in your list? And just like we showed on those slides, we'd suggest that you think about talking to a combination of your direct beneficiaries, your indirect, so those families of, carers of, maybe their employers or future employers, schools, universities, whoever you're linking with, managers of buildings and heritage sites and theatres, who's indirectly benefiting as a result of you operating what you do. And then the wider stakeholders being arts and cultural networks and agencies and other people who will wanting to see those arts and cultural and sort of community-led culture improvements that I know all LEAP beneficiaries are trying to create, LEAP award winners. So think about what's your capacity to do this, what's your time, what's your budget, and how might you start to weave this in. Might you want some external support for some training or for some external sort of legitimacy and create more robust data and information over time, or is it fine for you to just get on with this as you can and as you need? Considering the ratios of who to involve. So what we mean by this is not just asking who your friends are and who's going to have happy things to say, but also asking those people who've disengaged or didn't come when you hoped they might, or haven't yet been able to sort of speak up and say how they're benefiting from what you're up to. What we also say as well is, in addition to measuring your impact and asking people what they've benefited from and what's been the highlights and what things have changed for them, you can also tuck in questions, those typical feedback questions, which aren't about impact and value. They're about market intelligence, they're about market research, and often you can kill two birds with one stone and tie some social impact and value measurement alongside that research, the market research, to see how you might improve your services going forward and other suggestions and for ways to improve or involve wider people in what you're doing. So things to bear in mind before you get started on designing how you might measure impact and value. What does this look like when it's done well? We'd suggest a bunch of options. A bunch of options. There are looking at who it is you want to talk to. So we call that thorough stakeholder engagement mapping. And in an earlier workshop, we looked at who are your stakeholders and stakeholder mapping. And this ties in with that. And really what you're trying to do, your customers, beneficiaries and stakeholders at whatever level, learning what they value, focusing on what they value most is where you start to work out what your key indicators are, because they all start to form a pattern. They all start to say similar things, which helps you work out, clearly you're having an impact in health, or you're having an impact in confidence building, or an impact in community or environmental improvement. You'll hear what they say and it will start to create repeat patterns for you that will pop out as key areas of value that you're, having an impact in. when you were thinking before about how is this happening in your organization or within your project already, you may have had chats with your LEAP um, community development manager, or even at the point of applying, starting to think about how we're going to measure the impact of what we're doing here. And often, people might plan to do interviews with people before or after whatever it is they get involved with, or during an event, going around and getting some box pops or doing some, simple interviews with people. Surveys, again, before and after, or, maybe even 2-3 months after, to help really see what the impact has been beyond the initial activities or the initial thing. It's almost time dependent. If you're running a one-off event or short things, you have to gather that feedback or that impact quickly and there and then, or within a short period of time. But if you've been running a program or a series of workshops or something that's been running a bit longer, and then people need to go away and sort of embed their learning, then measuring the impact with them after is usually better, because you get to hear more about the so what happened as a result, what happened next, what's the change, what's the progress. You might have built in doing focus groups, and that's sometimes a quick and easy way to build into events or to build in and add on to something you're already running. Could be the beginning to shape the design of something, in the middle to get feedback, or at the end of a session, or after a project or as part of an evaluation day. Gathering information as a group can sometimes save you that one-to-one time, having interviews and chasing people to fill in surveys, and can be quite a useful thing. You might be reviewing existing research that you've done or that other people have done. You don't necessarily always have to gather that data yourself. If you're trying to present a case that arts and participating in the arts increases well-being, or if you're trying to state that working in arts and media with young people achieves increased communication skills, there will be existing research out there already that will tell you this. There'll be hundreds of projects, agencies and organizations, academics who've gone and researched this, and by Googling all sorts of things or looking up certain thematic agencies at a national or regional level, you'll be able to see what existing research is out there that can back up and endorse and add credence to what it is you're saying with your own direct research. Clearly, there are evaluation forms. I've got my exclamation marks, question marks there. Quite often, people don't ask the right questions in evaluation forms. They put too many questions that don't matter, or they don't add in the questions that ask about the ripple effect. So what's happening next? What's happened as a result? And so it's really important to maybe get some feedback and some support on any evaluation forms that you're putting together, to make sure that you're asking the right questions. Outcome stars we mentioned as a method, really accessible way of working with your community at the beginning and at the end of an event, of a program, of an exhibition, whatever it might be, to see how were people feeling at the start, and then how are they feeling at the end. And by having a kind of, it looks like a kind of series of spokes coming out of a central point on a scale of 1 to 5 or on a scale of 1 to 3, people can then track how they're feeling at the start, how they're feeling at the end, and it gives a really good visual representation actually, as well as kind of progress or change or otherwise made. And mentioned earlier about video vox pops and other things. It doesn't all have to be technical or surveys or lots of written and typed information. It may be much easier as part of an event or within a project you're running to be using different kinds of video media, and having people send you a voice note or for feedback, and or what's happening for them now, or having them create little videos, or having somebody do that with you at your events and activities. At the time, you just think, oh, it's nice to collect some videos and show what's happening. But actually, if you get them to find out, what have been the highlights for you, is there anything that you're now doing differently, or you're thinking you might do differently as a result of getting involved in what we're up to? What's changed for you since being part of this initiative will soon give you impact data that you hadn't realised you've got. It then gets a bit more technical as you start to move into kind of analysing. So you can go and do all of this stuff, do your interviews, do your surveys, get your videos, but then you have to spend time, or somebody else potentially spend time analysing what you found out and turning it into things. So you might find that after you've got a load of surveys, or you've interviewed 10, 20 people, or you've reviewed a bunch of little mini vox pops, actually there's a whole bunch of patterns jumping out that helps you create some statistics. Maybe clearly it's going to help you create quotes and testimonials, different case studies of what you're doing, impact case studies, and you can go and analyze views or the number of people who've been engaging with you and what they've been saying on your social media. That there's all sorts of ways to use tools as well to sort of analyze that information. As I mentioned before, there's often existing data out there. So some of the analysis and communication may have been done for you. You've got your direct learning from events, programs, and activities you've been running, coupled with existing research and data out there that shows the need or the impact on a national or a local scale, and how your work's feeding into that, or how what you're doing might be feeding into local policy priorities around engaging more diverse people in the arts, or creating more jobs for people in the arts, or saving certain types of venues, or addressing inequalities. You'll know what key policy priorities and challenges are happening locally to you, and starting to think about how the work and the activities that you've been doing feeds into local change from an arts, creativity, cultural, and environmental perspective. You're actually helping to improve. And having all of that evidence helps you better promote yourself, helps people to see that you're influential in achieving the change and creating the work that you are, and ultimately being able to use that information to help pitch, to help write stronger funding bids, is often a key aspect to what this is all for. And just adding that part at the end there around independent support, I would say that everything in the pink boxes are things that potentially you can get started with. They're not rocket science, really. They're you or members of your group or your team, or with some guidance and support from people at the Leap, you can gather, do, and analyze these things to a point, depending on what time you've got, and so on. But independent support, I would say, comes where you might need some additional training, or if you've not done much facilitation or stakeholder engagement, as we call it, and you need some support to help facilitate certain groups, focus groups, gather information, or maybe you've not got the time, and actually having somebody else do that for you would be helpful, or having somebody, as it says, external do this stuff, can help create a bit of robustness, legitimacy, and an independent view, and a bit more depth sometimes as to what the content is that gets created and how that gets reported, can be really helpful to show an independent review has taken place, for example. It also is helpful to bring additional people in when you need help to sort of do some of the cost analysis and have access to some of the wider information on what are the savings to the public purse. They call them key financial proxies, but what are the key costs? What does it cost for all of these things? And how some of the work that you're doing might be saving those costs. Might be something that further down the line that you want to get some support with. So just I would say, know your audience and know how, your stakeholders, your beneficiaries, your customers, how to get hold of them, and start to do some of these techniques with them within a budget that you can manage, and within a time frame that you can manage. And you'll know what kinds of techniques will work best for your community, how will they respond best, and you use those methods to save time and to make sure you get the best feedback and engagement out of this stuff. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope it's given you food for thought, and ultimately, we've given you some thoughts on, how to create a theory of change and start to map down what your theory of change might be. and start to help link this to your social impact, remembering that within that theory of change, you're looking at what are the services, what are the results, what's that impact likely to look like. You can then work out who your customers, beneficiaries and stakeholders are, to be able to then talk to them about what they value. And all it's very simple. You find out, who are they and how do they first come across you, because that can provide useful intel. Where are they at when they first got in touch? What have been the highlights for them in it, or what have they valued or enjoyed most? And then what is then happening for them? How have things changed for them? What's improved? Have they made any progress? Are they now doing anything differently as a result of being involved in what you've had to offer? And that soon starts to build a picture for you of the kinds of areas of impact that you're having with people, be that in skills and knowledge, be that in health, be that in having better awareness of what's going on in the local area, be that feeling more confident to walk into certain types of arts and cultural venues that they've never been to before. Whatever it may be, you ask them those questions, they'll soon tell you the difference that you're making to them and to the community. As we've said, remember to get those key questions in around progress and what's changed for people, not just measuring and tracking, bums on seats or demographics or, age range and these sorts of things. It's good to see what's the difference being made. And then once you've got this, you start with what you can manage. Start with something simple that you can manage, and then you repeat this over time, and bring in specialists longer term that might help save you time or build legitimacy into what it is that you're wanting to do. So we wish you luck with this. We'd say recap on some of the wider themes through the webinar series, for example, on the business model canvas, and on measuring those, learning who are your stakeholders and customers and beneficiaries, that it all knits in together and helps you progress with what it is you're doing. So we'd say good luck, and we hope you'll take the leap. And do get in touch with your community development managers for further support, to access other tools, and for any suggested wider training needs.